Alien Commander Zekare of Zalori, a high-ranking officer in the Galactic Federation's Peace Corps, had spent years preparing for this moment. Her sleek silver vessel, adorned with symbols of unity and diplomacy, glided through Earth's atmosphere, drawing the attention of every major city below. As the ship neared the Academy's coordinates, Zekare took a steadying breath, reminding herself that the humans were new to the Federation, still adjusting to intergalactic protocols, still rough around the edges. Her mission was one of understanding and diplomacy, yet her heart thrummed with a mix of anticipation and unease. When the ship landed on a carefully cleared runway, a group of high-ranking officials waited in formation, their uniforms pristine and their faces expressionless, as if this were an everyday occurrence. At the front of the group stood General Stone, a tall, broad-shouldered figure with graying hair and an air of command that felt almost tangible. His eyes were sharp, calculating, and slightly wary as he watched Zekare descend from her vessel. Zekare, in her flowing, iridescent Federation robes, which shimmered like stardust in the sunlight, stepped forward to greet him. Her appearance was undeniably alien to the humans. Her skin a faint shade of lavender, her eyes larger and more luminous than any humans, and her face marked with intricate patterns symbolizing her rank and achievements. She extended a delicate, six-fingered hand, a symbol of peace in her culture. "General Stone," she said in her melodic, almost musical voice, "I am honored to begin this mission of peace and understanding with the esteemed humans of Earth." Stone nodded, shaking her hand firmly. "Commander Zekare, it's a pleasure to welcome you to our military academy. I trust you'll find our approach to defense enlightening." The emphasis on defense was subtle, but not lost on Zekare. She offered a polite smile, but her curiosity grew. She had studied Earth's history extensively and knew that humans had a long-standing culture of warfare and conflict. Her people, the Zalorians, had abandoned all forms of aggression centuries ago, choosing instead to focus on diplomacy, unity, and conflict resolution. The idea of defense was, to her, an almost forgotten relic of the past. As they moved through the Academy's gates, Zekare noticed the towering walls and razor-straight pathways that crisscrossed the grounds, forming an efficient, if somewhat intimidating, layout. Rows of flags fluttered in the wind, each emblazoned with various symbols and slogans. One caught her eye, a bold inscription reading, "Strength through resilience." She couldn't shake the underlying tone of endurance and perseverance the phrase implied, as if it was expected that these cadets would face immense hardship. "Quite the facility," she commented, attempting to keep her tone neutral. General Stone gave a slight, proud nod. "Every inch is designed for purpose, Commander. Here, we don't train warriors. We forge leaders." A group of young cadets marched past them in perfect synchronization, their eyes fixed forward, their movements precise and sharp. Zekare observed them closely, noting the discipline in their expressions, but also the rigidity, how each one seemed to lose a piece of individuality within the formation. "Is it not difficult for them to train with such intensity?" Zekare asked, choosing her words carefully. Stone chuckled. "Commander, they thrive under it. Our cadets are taught to push beyond their limits. Only through challenge and adversity can they reach their potential. You'll see it in our training exercises." Zekare nodded, masking her concern. She'd never seen training that required such force. On Zalori, training was a gentle process of discovery, where recruits explored their strengths and bonded as a unit, but never in a way that strained them or risked injury. Their tour continued through the various buildings, each bearing a distinct purpose. Classrooms lined with intricate charts and combat scenarios, study halls with vast shelves of ancient war tactics, and, finally, the combat simulator wing. Stone gestured to a vast virtual simulation arena. "This," he declared with a hint of pride, "is where our cadets prepare for the real thing. Simulations are crafted to put them under the stress they might face in battle. It helps them build resilience, real resilience, mind you." The door slid open, and Zekare peered inside. She watched a simulation unfold before her eyes. A holographic scene where cadets, armed with blunted weapons, faced simulated enemies. Their movements were sharp, aggressive, and unhesitating. One cadet was struck down, only to rise again with visible pain etched on his face, refusing to yield. Stone noticed her expression and offered an explanation. "The simulation is set to test their pain tolerance," he said, as if it were the most natural thing in the universe. "Out there, the enemy doesn't give second chances. We ensure our cadets can handle anything thrown their way." Zechariah was silent for a long moment, absorbing the intensity of what she was witnessing. Pain tolerance training? Was the concept of self-preservation not as central as she had assumed? What about their mental well-being? She finally asked, her voice calm, but her tone probing. "Such stress and intensity, does it not affect their minds?" Stone's expression was stoic. "It does, Commander, and that's exactly why we train them. A soldier who hesitates, who doubts, is a soldier who may fail their mission. We train our cadets to override fear and pain." The word struck Zechariah deeply. In her culture, mental well-being was paramount. Fear and pain were acknowledged, respected, and worked through with the support of others. But here, she realized, fear was seen as a weakness, something to be conquered rather than understood. As they continued through the grounds, they approached the memorial garden, a small patch of green amidst the stark architecture, where stone plaques bore the names of cadets who had made the ultimate sacrifice in battle. General Stone spoke reverently of those who had fallen, detailing their bravery and valor. Zechariah was struck by the solemnity of it all, how the Academy honored those who had died for their beliefs. She understood the reverence, yet something in her heart twisted. Was this sacrifice truly necessary, or was it an avoidable tragedy born from their militaristic culture? By the time they concluded their tour, dusk had begun to settle over the Academy. The fiery colors of the sunset cast an almost eerie glow over the grounds, and Zechariah felt a strange mixture of awe and discomfort. She had witnessed dedication and loyalty beyond what she'd imagined, but there was a cost, one that felt heavy, dark, and deeply ingrained. As General Stone escorted her back to her ship, she turned to him, her voice soft but resolute. "Your academy is remarkable. The cadets show a strength that is both admirable and challenging to comprehend for one of my culture. I wonder, though, at what cost does this strength come?" Stone met her gaze, his expression one of steady resolve. "Commander, strength always has a cost, but for us it's a price worth paying." With those final words lingering in the air, Zechariah boarded her vessel, her mind a flurry of thoughts and questions. She had come to understand humanity, but instead, she had uncovered more mysteries and contradictions than answers. As her ship ascended into the sky, she cast one last glance at the Academy, wondering if Earth's path could ever align with the peaceful vision of the Federation, or if they were destined to remain as a paradox, caught between peace and war, strength and sacrifice. The next morning, Commander Zechariah arrived at the training grounds, eager yet apprehensive. After her previous day's tour of the Academy's facilities, her thoughts had been restless, filled with questions she could scarcely comprehend herself. The grounds were alive with the sounds of drills and orders barked sharply by instructors as young cadets ran, jumped, and marched with precision. They moved like a single organism, perfectly synchronized, their faces hard-set with determination. General Stone greeted her with a nod, sensing her curiosity. "Today, you'll see the heart of our training. We shape these young men and women to become not only soldiers but disciplined warriors, ready to defend their people." Zechariah gave a slight nod, masking her apprehension. "Defend," she thought, letting the word roll through her mind. She knew the meaning intellectually, but the way Stone used it held implications she struggled to align with her own values. On Zalori, a soldier's duty was primarily as a mediator or healer, only engaging physically in extreme, unavoidable circumstances. Yet here, it seemed like physical preparation was an unwavering foundation. The tour began with the obstacle course. Stone led her to a high platform overlooking the course, where cadets pushed themselves through a grueling series of hurdles, crawling under barbed wire, scaling walls, crossing ropes suspended high above the ground, and enduring simulated enemy fire. The course was muddy, brutal, and took a clear physical toll on the cadets. Stone crossed his arms and watched them with a faint smile. Every cadet completes this course twice a week. We train them not just to withstand difficulty, but to dominate it. Here, adversity is just another hurdle to conquer. Zechariah watched as one cadet stumbled, his arm skidding along the mud, fresh scratches painting his skin red. Despite the obvious pain, he gritted his teeth, clambering back to his feet without hesitation and continuing forward. She found herself instinctively reaching out, as though to stop the exercise and allow him a moment to tend to his wounds. Stone, noticing her reaction, chuckled. "You see, Commander, we don't coddle our cadets. That cadet has just learned a valuable lesson about resilience. We don't stop just because things are difficult or painful. Pain," Zechariah said slowly, "is something to avoid, isn't it? To endure it without rest. Wouldn't that be damaging?" Stone's face softened slightly, but his voice remained firm. "Pain is part of the process, Commander. They learn to manage it, to overcome it, rather than letting it control them. They grow stronger by pushing through." Zechariah observed the other cadets, each as determined as the next, their faces contorted with strain and focus. She couldn't deny their strength, but she felt a growing discomfort as she noticed how detached they seemed, as though they were trained to ignore their own limits. On Zalori, physical boundaries were respected. Pain was acknowledged and met with care, as they viewed strength in unity and empathy. Here, it was evident that resilience was linked to a willingness to sacrifice comfort, even health, for the sake of an outcome. They moved on to the endurance training area, where another set of cadets were engaged in sparring exercises. The trainees squared off in pairs, grappling, striking, and blocking with precise, practiced movements. A few sparring sessions seemed to escalate, with cadets throwing each other to the ground with considerable force. Zechariah winced as one cadet landed heavily, only to spring back up, wiping a smear of blood from his lip with a stoic expression. "Here we build not only the body, but the mind's tolerance for pressure," Stone explained. "A cadet must be as tough mentally as they are physically. We push them to the edge to make sure they can perform under any condition." The words unsettled Zechariah. She noticed how instructors encouraged the cadets to shake it off whenever they showed signs of pain. Instead of offering care, the instructors shouted for them to stand, to face their opponent again, and to focus on the mission. Stone must have sensed her unease. On Zalori, Zechariah began carefully. "Our military exercises are less strenuous. We don't train for combat unless it is purely for defense, and even then, our focus is on neutralizing without harm." Stone gave a small chuckle, his tone incredulous. "Commander, sometimes defense is only effective when you can meet aggression with equal force. A warrior who hesitates is a warrior who loses. Here, we prepare our cadets to act quickly, without hesitation, to protect those who can't protect themselves." Zechariah watched as the cadet who had been thrown earlier finally landed a successful hit, and his instructor patted him on the back approvingly. The cadet's face lit up briefly with pride before settling back into focus. As much as she wanted to admire their perseverance, she couldn't help but question the long-term effects of such training. As they moved on, Stone brought her to the survival simulation zone, an expansive area designed to mimic real-world battle environments. The terrain was uneven, littered with rubble and debris. Zechariah could see cadets maneuvering through the field, moving in small teams, communicating in low whispers as they simulated reconnaissance missions. One cadet lay in the grass, his leg injured from a simulated explosive. His teammates were forced to decide whether to leave him behind or try to extract him despite the added risk. After a few tense moments, they chose to leave him, knowing that any attempt to rescue him would compromise their mission. Stone noticed her discomfort once again. "They make hard decisions here, Commander. On the battlefield, you won't always have the luxury of saving everyone. They have to choose the greater good, even if it's painful." Zechariah felt a pang of sadness as she watched the cadet lie still, alone, until a trainer came to assist him. It was a stark reminder that humans, despite their alliances and communities, were still bound by a mindset that valued objectives over individuals. On Zalori, the wounded would never be abandoned. Their culture emphasized unity, where the group succeeded or failed together. After hours of observing, Zekaray's thoughts had become a maelstrom of contradictions. She had witnessed incredible strength and discipline, but it came at the cost of individuality and care. The cadets were trained to endure suffering as though it were their birthright, as if pain and sacrifice were the only roads to greatness. In her culture, a great leader was someone who nurtured their team, who saw vulnerability as a shared challenge, not as a weakness to overcome. Finally, the tour of the training grounds concluded, and they returned to the main academy. Zekaray looked out over the vast complex, watching the cadets as they moved with military precision back to their barracks, their faces impassive, their backs straight. "General Stone," she said softly, "I have witnessed great strength here, but I can't help but wonder, is it strength that serves them, or strength that consumes them?" Stone's expression grew thoughtful. For a moment, it seemed he might consider her words, but then his resolve returned. "Commander, they are prepared for whatever the galaxy throws at them. They're willing to sacrifice everything to defend Earth. That, to me, is true strength." As Zekaray left the training grounds, she felt a strange mixture of admiration and sorrow. She couldn't deny that the human cadets were resilient, but she wondered if they had traded compassion for survival, empathy for strength. In her mind, questions simmered. Could humanity truly fit into the peaceful ideals of the Federation? Or would their drive to overcome, to dominate even themselves, ultimately lead them down a path of isolation? The harsh discipline she had witnessed haunted her, a lingering reminder of the differences between her world and theirs. She knew now that the real challenge of her mission would be finding a way to bridge this divide, if it could be bridged at all. The following day, Commander Zekaray stood in the cold, metallic corridor of Earth's most advanced military weapons facility. The atmosphere was different from the Academy grounds, harsher, more sterile, and filled with an unspoken tension that sent a chill through her. She had been briefed on Earth's technological advancements, but seeing them up close was an entirely different experience. As she waited for General Stone, her mind raced with questions. How far would humanity go in their quest for security? And, more unsettlingly, at what cost? Stone finally arrived, his face as stern and determined as ever, though today there was a hint of pride in his expression. The weaponry, he had hinted the night before, was something he was especially eager to show her. These were tools of power, carefully crafted, each one representing the pinnacle of human engineering and a promise of protection for Earth. To Zekaray, however, each weapon felt like an unspoken threat, a reminder of humanity's complicated relationship with peace and aggression. "Commander Zekaray," Stone began, gesturing to the enormous sliding door before them. "Prepare yourself for a tour of Earth's most advanced defense technology. What you're about to see represents our commitment to the safety and sovereignty of our planet." The door slid open, and Zekaray found herself standing before a vast chamber, filled with rows of gleaming weapons, firearms, explosives, and machines she could hardly begin to identify. Every weapon was meticulously arranged, shining under the harsh, sterile lights. Scientists in lab coats bustled about, each one engrossed in tasks as they calibrated, tested, and adjusted the equipment with utmost precision. Stone led her to the first display, where a massive, sleek, black cannon was showcased. Its barrel was lined with circuitry, glowing a faint blue that seemed almost alive, and Zekaray could feel a low hum emanating from it. She had never encountered a weapon of this magnitude. It felt like standing beside a dormant creature, one waiting for the command to unleash devastation. "This is the Paragon Beam," Stone said with evident pride. "It's an energy-based weapon capable of penetrating most known defenses in the galaxy. If an enemy fleet were to attack Earth, the Paragon Beam could take them down before they even reach the atmosphere." Zekaray looked at him, her voice filled with quiet concern. "Do you truly believe such a weapon is necessary, General?" In the Galactic Federation, we have defensive systems, but nothing on this scale. Stone's expression didn't waver. The Federation may have achieved peace, but we are new to this intergalactic alliance. Not everyone out there is a friend. We learned long ago that strength keeps adversaries in check. This isn't about seeking conflict. It's about being ready for it. They moved on to a long array of firearms, each one labeled with terms Zekare didn't fully understand. Assault rifle, tactical shotgun, sniper. Stone explained each one in detail, describing their precision, range, and lethality. Zekare found herself disturbed by the efficiency with which each weapon was designed to cause harm. There was no pretense of defense here. These were tools of destruction, each one capable of inflicting considerable damage on a living being. These weapons are designed to fit a wide range of situations, Stone explained. We believe in versatility, in being able to handle any type of threat. And yet, Zekare replied softly, each weapon here is made to kill. On Zalori, weapons are last resorts, used only when there is no other option. Even then, they are designed to incapacitate, not to end lives. Stone paused, looking at her with a curious mix of admiration and skepticism. That's an admirable philosophy, Commander, but Earth is different. Our history has been one of conflict and survival. Peace is our goal, but it's a peace built on strength. Without it, we'd be vulnerable to those who don't share your ideals. They continued to a section filled with experimental prototypes. Stone stopped in front of a large, sleek drone that hovered silently, its shell glistening under the lights. Its small, bright sensors scanned its surroundings, and Zekare couldn't shake the feeling that it was watching her. This is the Sentinel drone, Stone explained. Fully autonomous. It can patrol for days, identify intruders, and, if necessary, neutralize them without human intervention. It's designed to be our eyes and ears on the battlefield. Zekare's heart sank as she considered the implications. An autonomous weapon? One that operates without human oversight? How can you ensure it won't harm innocents? Stone's face hardened slightly. The Sentinel is programmed with advanced protocols. It will only act if there is a confirmed threat. Trust me, Commander, our scientists have thought of everything. But what about when mistakes happen? She pressed, her voice low but firm. How many lives would you consider acceptable to lose in the name of efficiency? Stone's expression softened briefly, as though he hadn't expected such a question. We take every precaution, Commander, but you have to understand, sometimes sacrifices are necessary. In war, there are always losses. Our priority is to minimize them, to protect as many as we can. They continued down the line, and Zekare could feel a strange weight settling over her as she observed each weapon. There were handheld devices capable of emitting sound waves that could incapacitate a person from a distance, energy shields that could deflect projectiles, and an assortment of explosives that could obliterate entire buildings. She felt the cold efficiency behind each device and found herself wondering, could humans ever see the Federation's path as a viable one? Stone led her to the final part of the tour, where a dark, massive door marked with a red warning sign awaited them. He nodded to the guard, who scanned a badge to unlock it. Inside, Zekare felt a cold chill as she realized this area was under heavy security, with multiple layers of locks and protocols. They entered a narrow, dimly lit corridor that led to a circular, armored room with a glass chamber in its center. Inside the chamber was a small, faintly glowing vial, emitting a soft, pulsing light. This, Stone said, his voice hushed with respect, is our last line of defense. We call it Project Harbinger. It's an experimental substance capable of unleashing immense destruction, more powerful than anything you've seen. Zekare's eyes widened as she stared at the vial. What exactly does it do? Think of it as a highly concentrated form of energy, he replied. Once released, it spreads and reacts with the atmosphere, creating an explosive force capable of erasing entire cities. We've never deployed it, but its existence serves as a deterrent. Zekare's voice trembled as she responded. You mean a weapon designed not just to neutralize, but to completely annihilate? Why would you ever create something so devastating? Stone's face hardened again. Because sometimes the threat of annihilation is the only language some understand, Commander. Our enemies need to know that if they push us, we have the power to push back. It's not something we're eager to use, but we will, if it means protecting Earth. Zekaray's mind was spinning. Her people had long abandoned weapons of mass destruction, understanding that such power, once unleashed, could not be controlled. To wield that level of devastation meant surrendering a part of one's own humanity, or, in her case, Zalorian integrity. For Stone, however, it seemed almost second nature to wield such power as a means to an end, a necessary evil. As they left the chamber, Zekaray couldn't help but voice her thoughts. General, I see your people's resilience, but I wonder if these weapons reflect not just a desire for protection, but also a fear that has grown consuming. Stone met her gaze, his expression unreadable. Maybe, Commander, we are afraid, but fear has kept us alive. We've learned that if we don't stand ready to defend ourselves, someone else will take advantage of that. In a galaxy of unknowns, we'd rather be feared than be vulnerable. Zekaray was silent as they walked back, her thoughts tangled in a complex web of admiration, horror, and sorrow. She couldn't deny that the human drive for survival was powerful, but she wondered if it had consumed their potential for true peace. As they left the facility, she stole one last look at the weapons and machinery within, feeling a sadness she could scarcely put into words. Returning to her quarters, Zekaray's mind raced with the memories of what she had seen. She recorded a message in her log, her voice quiet but resolute. Today I witnessed the extent of Earth's defensive capabilities. The humans are willing to go to terrifying lengths to protect themselves, holding on to a legacy of conflict. Their strength is undeniable, but I fear that in their quest for safety, they may lose what makes them truly worthy of joining the Federation: compassion, unity, and the belief that life itself is sacred. How can we guide them if they are so consumed by their need for power? Or perhaps they must choose that path themselves. As Zekaray looked out at the night sky, she knew that her mission had taken on new meaning. This was more than an evaluation of military capability. It was a question of whether Earth could transcend its past or if, like so many civilizations before, they were destined to be both. The following morning, Commander Zekaray arrived at the Academy's battle simulation facility, feeling an uneasy mixture of curiosity and apprehension. She had seen the humans' weapons, their endurance training, and their willingness to endure hardship and pain for a cause. But as she stood before the towering doors of the simulation chamber, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to witness the heart of Earth's military philosophy. General Stone stood waiting for her, looking particularly serious today, his hands folded behind his back as he watched the cadets preparing for the simulation. In the air hung a tension Zekaray I hadn't sensed before, a taut readiness in every cadet's stance, as though they were preparing for a real battle rather than a mere exercise. Commander Zekaray, Stone greeted her with a nod. Today, you'll see our cadets in action. They'll be participating in a full-scale, simulated battle. We use these exercises to assess their decision-making, leadership, and ability to remain calm under pressure. Simulated battle? Zekaray repeated, trying to conceal her unease. How close is this to an actual combat scenario? Stone's eyes gleamed with a strange pride. It's as close as they'll get without actual bloodshed. We spare no detail. Every choice, every mistake, has consequences here. They're trained to act as though their lives, and the lives of those they protect, depend on their actions. The doors to the simulation chamber slid open, revealing an enormous, sprawling terrain that looked shockingly realistic. Trees and rocky outcroppings dotted the landscape, and a small village, complete with crumbling buildings and smoke rising from chimneys, lay in the distance. Zekaray was taken aback by the realism of it all. The Academy had clearly spared no expense in recreating a battlefield that would mirror the chaos and devastation of actual war. Stone escorted her to a high vantage point overlooking the simulation. From here, they could observe the cadets as they moved through the field, each wearing armor equipped with sensors that would register hits without causing real harm. High-tech drones hovered above, projecting holographic enemies that advanced on the cadets, looking eerily lifelike as they moved with a cold, calculating precision. Today's objective, Stone explained, is for the cadets to infiltrate the enemy village and secure the civilians within while neutralizing the opposing forces. It's a standard hostage rescue mission, but the enemies are programmed to resist and will target cadets relentlessly. Zechariah studied the cadets below. She could see the determination etched on their faces as they crouched behind rocks, exchanged hand signals, and moved in coordinated formations. Yet, something in their expressions troubled her. There was a hardness, a readiness to act without hesitation, even if it meant endangering themselves or others. For them, it seemed, doubt was a luxury they couldn't afford. The simulation began with the sound of gunfire echoing through the terrain as the holographic enemies spotted the cadets and engaged them. The cadets responded with precision and efficiency, spreading out across the field, using cover and advancing tactically. Each movement was calculated, rehearsed, a testament to the intense training they'd undergone. Zechariah couldn't deny their skill, yet as the first casualty fell, a cadet hit in the shoulder who went down clutching his arm. She felt a pang of discomfort. Stone seemed to sense a reaction. In war, Commander, casualties are inevitable. This exercise teaches them to keep moving, to prioritize the mission even when a teammate is down. Zechariah nodded slowly, though her mind was racing. On Zalori, every member of a team was seen as invaluable, and the loss of even one person was considered a failure of leadership and planning. Here, the cadets were taught to keep going, to leave behind those who could no longer fight. It was a pragmatism she found difficult to accept. As the simulation continued, the cadets closed in on the village, moving stealthily and efficiently. Yet the closer they got, the more chaotic the scene became. Holographic civilians ran from building to building, their faces etched with terror, while the enemy holograms fired indiscriminately. It was a scene that mirrored the devastation of real warfare, with all its confusion and fear. One squad of cadets reached a cluster of civilians huddled in the corner of a ruined building. The squad leader, a young cadet with a determined look in her eyes, shouted for them to stay down and remain silent. She signaled for her teammates to cover the exits, and they prepared to escort the civilians out. Then, a burst of gunfire sounded from across the field, and a holographic enemy emerged, aiming directly at the civilians. In a split-second decision, the squad leader ordered one of her cadets to draw fire away from the group, a move that put the cadet directly in harm's way. Zechariah watched in horror as the young cadet obeyed without hesitation, sprinting out into the open and drawing the enemy's attention while his teammates secured the civilians. The distraction worked, but the cadet was quickly shot by the holographic enemy, collapsing on the ground. Zechariah turned to Stone, unable to keep silent any longer. They were willing to sacrifice one of their own, just to complete the mission? On Zalori, we would never endanger a teammate in such a way. Stone's gaze was steady. Sometimes, Commander, sacrifices must be made. That cadet knew the risk, and he chose to act. It's a choice we train them to make, to put the greater good above personal safety. In a real battle, hesitation can cost lives. Zechariah felt a chill run through her. To sacrifice one for the sake of many, it was a philosophy as old as war itself, but one that struck her as deeply unsettling. On Zalori, leaders were taught to find solutions that minimized harm for everyone, even if it meant taking longer or facing greater personal risk. Here, it seemed that sacrifice was not only accepted but expected. The simulation continued, and the cadets successfully cleared the village, securing the civilians and neutralizing the remaining enemies. Stone nodded approvingly, clearly satisfied with the results. They showed discipline and quick thinking. No mission goes perfectly, but they adapted, and they succeeded. As the simulation ended, the cadets gathered in the debriefing area, their faces flushed and their bodies tense. The instructors began critiquing their performance, pointing out errors, praising moments of ingenuity, and highlighting areas for improvement. Zechariah noticed that they were encouraged to take pride in their decisions, especially the difficult ones, as though making such sacrifices was a badge of honor. After the debriefing, Stone approached the cadets and addressed them in a tone both stern and proud. "You acted with courage today. Remember that every decision you make on the battlefield has consequences. Every choice, every action, it's all part of the mission. Never forget that the lives of others may rest on your shoulders." The cadets nodded, their expressions solemn but resolute. Zechariah could see that Stone's words had struck a deep chord within them. They were ready, she realized, to bear the weight of those choices, even if it meant facing unimaginable danger or sacrificing themselves. For them, it was a duty, a responsibility they had accepted without question. Once the cadets were dismissed, Zechariah turned to Stone, her voice quiet but intense. "General, your cadets are brave, and their dedication is unquestionable. But do they not feel fear? Doubt? To sacrifice oneself so readily, does that not haunt them?" Stone looked at her with a mixture of respect and resolve. "Commander, fear and doubt are natural, but we train them to overcome those feelings. They know what's at stake. A soldier who hesitates, who questions their orders, can cost lives. They're trained to see the bigger picture." Zechariah nodded, though she felt a deep sorrow within her. She understood that Earth's military philosophy valued loyalty and sacrifice, but she couldn't shake the feeling that it came at a tremendous cost to the individuals within its ranks. These cadets, so young and full of potential, were taught to view their lives as expendable for the sake of an objective, a reality that felt alien to her own values. As she returned to her quarters that evening, Zechariah recorded her thoughts into her log. "Today, I witnessed the human cadets in their simulated battle. Their bravery is undeniable, yet I fear that this bravery is born from a willingness to sacrifice themselves without question. I cannot help but wonder if they're trained to value their own lives, or if they're simply expected to endure, to be willing to give everything for a cause they are taught to see as greater than themselves. In the Federation, we believe that each life has intrinsic value, that each loss is a wound upon the collective. But here, sacrifice seems to be an expectation, almost a duty." She paused, gathering her thoughts before continuing. "How can we guide Earth to a path of peace when their young are taught to equate loyalty with self-sacrifice, to see strength in the willingness to abandon themselves for a mission? They are strong, yes, but I fear that their strength comes at the cost of compassion, for themselves and perhaps for others." As she gazed out at the darkening sky, Zechariah felt a heavy weight settle within her. Earth was a world of contrasts, a place where hope and fear, loyalty and sacrifice. Commander Zechariah sat in the quiet solitude of her quarters, surrounded by the soft hum of her ship as it prepared for the journey back to Zalori. Outside the window, Earth was just beginning to shrink into a blue-green speck against the backdrop of stars. Her mission was complete, yet she felt a weight in her chest that hadn't been there when she'd first arrived. The things she had witnessed over the past few days had shaken her, leaving her with a deep sense of sorrow and uncertainty. She had come to Earth to understand humanity, to assess their readiness to join the Galactic Federation, but instead, she felt as though she'd glimpsed into a dark mirror of her own values. Sitting before her recording device, she took a deep breath, steadying herself. Her final report to the Federation would not be easy to convey. "Commander's log," she began, her voice measured but filled with an undertone of sorrow. "This is Commander Zechariah, reporting on the completion of my diplomatic mission to Earth. I have observed the training, the weaponry, and the culture of this planet's military forces, and I am left with conflicting emotions." She paused, considering how best to convey her thoughts. Each memory from her time at the academy seemed to weigh on her, pressing against her with the urgency of unfinished questions. Her mind lingered on the cadets, young, unflinching, trained to sacrifice themselves without hesitation. She could still see the faces of those cadets in the simulated battle, their expressions hardened by discipline and duty, yet with a subtle fragility beneath the surface. They were brave, she couldn't deny that, but it was a bravery born from something she could scarcely comprehend. As members of the Galactic Federation, we have long held that peace is not simply the absence of conflict, but a fundamental respect for life itself. On Zalori, our defense forces are trained to preserve life above all, to neutralize threats with minimal harm, and to value every life, including the lives of those we are sworn to protect. But here on Earth, the concept of defense is entwined with sacrifice, with loyalty to a cause that supersedes personal safety, even personal life. Zekaray's thoughts drifted back to General Stone. He had been a figure of unwavering resolve, the embodiment of humanity's resilience and strength, yet also a reminder of its fierce attachment to self-preservation, even at great cost. She could still recall his words, "Fear has kept us alive." In many ways, it seemed that humanity's relationship with fear had shaped their entire philosophy, fueling a culture that valued dominance, preparedness, and a readiness to sacrifice. Humanity has cultivated strength from a history of conflict, and I admire their resolve, she continued. But I fear that in their pursuit of strength, they have begun to lose something essential: compassion, perhaps, or even a sense of intrinsic self-worth. They view their sacrifices as noble, their willingness to endure as a form of loyalty. Yet I am left wondering whether they have come to see themselves as expendable, rather than irreplaceable. Her voice wavered slightly as she thought of the weapons she had seen. The Paragon Beam, the Sentinel drones, and Project Harbinger. The weapon of last resort, so devastating that its mere existence was intended to keep enemies at bay. Earth's arsenal was one of unimaginable power, a stark contrast to the Federation's defense systems, which emphasized containment and de-escalation. She struggled to reconcile her people's philosophy with what she had seen, a belief that power could deter conflict, that destruction could prevent it. In their quest for peace, humanity has placed its faith in power, in deterrence so overwhelming that they hope no adversary would dare challenge them. Yet I wonder, can peace be truly attained through fear alone? Can harmony be maintained when one is willing to unleash devastation at the first sign of threat? The holographic recording device pulsed softly, indicating that her words were being logged and transmitted to the Federation's council back on Zalori. She glanced at it, hesitating, as her thoughts wandered back to the cadets she had met, those young humans filled with unyielding resolve and a sense of duty she couldn't dismiss. There was something beautiful about their commitment, even if it was wrapped in tragedy. But she feared that this very commitment, this willingness to sacrifice everything, might one day drive them down a path from which there was no return. It is my belief, she continued, that humanity has the potential for greatness. Their courage, their ingenuity, and their capacity for resilience are qualities that could serve the Federation well. Yet I am deeply concerned about the cost of this potential. They must learn to value life, not only in the lives of others but in themselves, or they risk being consumed by the very power they wield. Her mind wandered to her own people, the Zalorians, and their journey to peace. Centuries ago, they, too, had been a society built on power and strength. But they had chosen to turn away from that path, to embrace a philosophy of unity and compassion, believing that true peace lay not in dominance, but in mutual respect. She wondered if humanity could make the same choice, or if their legacy of conflict was too deeply ingrained to overcome. I recommend that Earth's entry into the Galactic Federation be delayed, she finally said, her voice heavy. They need time to evolve, to shed the remnants of a war-driven past and embrace a new philosophy. I believe it is possible, but it will require change, a change that must come from within. She leaned back, feeling the weight of her decision settle over her. It was not a judgment she made lightly, nor was it one she was certain would be well received. She knew that Earth's leaders might see it as a slight, a rejection. But to admit them into the Federation without addressing these issues would be a disservice, both to humanity and to the peaceful values the Federation had upheld for centuries. As she ended the recording, Zekaray took a moment to reflect on her journey. She had come to Earth with an open heart, hoping to find a kinship, a shared understanding of peace and unity. Instead, she had been confronted with a culture that was as fascinating as it was troubling, a society that sought safety through strength and saw sacrifice as the ultimate expression of loyalty. In many ways, Earth had left its mark on her, challenging her own beliefs, forcing her to question her own people's path to peace. Perhaps, she murmured softly, they are not so different from us after all. Perhaps they, too, are on a journey. As her ship slipped through the atmosphere and ascended into the vastness of space, Zekare looked back one last time at the blue-green planet below. Earth was beautiful, resilient, filled with a potential that was both exhilarating and frightening. She could only hope that, one day, humanity would learn to temper its strength with compassion, to find a way to protect itself without sacrificing its own humanity. Until that day, she would carry their story with her, a reminder that even in the darkest shadows of conflict, there was always a glimmer of light, a potential for peace waiting to be realized.